We're on our way to go get baby ducks. Hi, babies. Welcome back, everybody, and as you could probably tell by the intro, we finally got our first batch of baby ducklings. We've gotten 10 ducklings, 6 of which are this yellowish color. Those are Welsh Harlequin ducks, and there's 5 females and 1 male. And then we decided to get a grab bag of Cayuga ducks, which are the black ones, and we have no clue what gender those are. We decided to go with 5 females and 1 male because we've heard that it's a good ratio of drakes to hens. Time will tell. Right now we've got them outside in a brooder in the front yard, which is behind me. As you can see, we've chosen to use a large dog crate because it's what we had available for us. We've covered the top of the crate in tulle so that none of the small sparrows and birds that like to hang out under the front porch can get down into the brooder and either mess with the ducklings or steal all the food. We've put cardboard around to make sure that it's protective from drafts, but also make sure that the dog or any passing feral cats don't decide to mess with the ducklings. On the inside, we lined the bottom with a painter's drop cloth. Originally we were going to use tarp, but every tarp was really large and they're kind of expensive, so we just went with a fairly thick painter's drop cloth instead. On top of that, we're using wood chips, a soft wood chip. It's like this. And we're doing a deep bedding style in an attempt to help make sure that everything stays pretty dry. A couple times a day we come out here and we clean off the top layer of wood chips to make sure that everything stays dry enough for them, because let me tell you, little ducklings are messy. Just very, very messy. For the heat source, we decided to buy a heat plate, Brinsea one specifically. We decided to go with a heating plate because oftentimes lamps have a risk for fire. They can fall on the birds, they can burn out, break, shatter. We just didn't even want to deal with it. So we put down the money to get a heating plate instead, and so far we've had very good results with it. Now, of course, the watering situation is always a little challenging with little ducklings. They basically need water all the time, and when you have 10 of them, it is very hard to give all 10 of them access to water and then not have the water just end up everywhere but in the duck's belly. To attempt to minimize the amount of water that is spilled, we originally started with a traditional watering container. We found that they would literally just knock the whole thing over with their big old derpy feet, so we switched to this style, which is a water jug with holes cut in the sides. We used a lighter to round the edges so that they're not sharp. We put the water on a paint tray and then placed a grate on top of the paint tray in the hopes that the water that gets spilled will end up in the paint tray and not in the brooder. And so far it's worked to a degree. Of course, these ducks they get their feet wet and then they go and they walk somewhere else and that gets wet, so it's not a perfect solution, but it has cut down on the amount of water that ends up in the bedding for sure. The hardest part about using the paint tray so far is keeping it level. Because paint trays are naturally slanted, the water becomes slanted if you don't adjust the wood chips to help straighten the top of the painting tray out. So it's a work in progress. So far, The heater is the most important thing. I feel like they don't know what to do with themselves. There's so much space. They went from nothing to this. Hi, baby. Some greens. Another thing that we did was put them on what Brick calls magic water. This is a mixture, which you can see here on the screen, of different things, and apparently a lot of people use it, and it's basically just meant to help give the ducklings a head start on all of their gut bacteria, their electrolytes, and their health in general. So we made a couple batches and we've been using that. I have no clue if it's working or not working, but we haven't seen anything negative from it, so better safe than sorry, right? For feed, we're doing a mixture of scratch, grit, and greens. I've read online really mixed reviews about having greens versus not having greens. Some people consider greens a treat, but to me, greens are what ducks would naturally be eating outside anyways. And in Story's Guide to Ducks, he mentions that adding greens to their water from the get-go is good. He says the book says that it cuts down on cannibalism. So we've been giving them greens. We probably give them greens 2 to 3 times a day, the same amount that we do our adult ducks that are out that way. In terms of the scratch, let me just start this by saying figuring out how to feed ducks properly is a royal pain in the you-know-what. So when baby ducks first start out, they need to be on a relatively high protein scratch, and they need to have a supplement of niacin put in if you're using Chick Starter that is made for chickens. But if you buy a scratch that is a high protein that is made for game birds or ducks specifically, then you don't need to add the niacin. Let me tell you, finding feed that's made specifically for ducks is a challenge. What's worse is so many of these feeds say that they're made for both chickens and ducks, but they have different nutritional needs. And so I just spend a whole lot of my time being confused about what I actually should be buying. For the first week we used a game bird feed, and now we're going to switch over to a Mana Pro feed that is specifically made for ducks. In both cases we didn't need to add niacin because supposedly they both had niacin added to them with enough capacity to keep the ducks healthy. That being said, for anyone that's interested in how to do ducklings, how to raise ducklings, my understanding is that if you don't give them enough niacin, you need to give them brewer's yeast. It's their joints that suffer if you don't have enough of the niacin in place. So we started them off on a 22% protein feed, and now we're going to be moving them down to a 20%, and we're going to hover in the 18 to 20% range for the rest of their youth until we put them onto an adult maintenance feed or layers feed, depending on what time of year it is. So as of today, we've had these ducks about a week, and as you can see, they are much, much larger than what they were a week ago. We cannot believe how quickly they've grown. I know that ducks grow quickly. I've seen it online. I've watched videos about it, but it's very different to watch it right in front of you every day, where you come out every morning and you're like, gee, did you get bigger overnight? Why, yes, I did. I've also read in places that ducklings will basically exponentially start to eat more and more and more as they go through this huge growth spurt from weeks like 2 to 6. And let me tell you, they eat a lot. They really, really eat a lot. But so far it seems like they're settling in pretty well. They're very talkative. They're still a little bit shy of us, but we're working on that slowly. But honestly, enough about that. Everybody just wants to see ducklings, right? That's what you're here for. So let's look at ducklings. Time for the B-roll montage. So, sad news time. You might notice in our B-roll that we had 6 ducks that were yellow, and then we went from 6 to 5 ducks that were yellow. And that's because we lost one of them. So with the dog kennel that we're using, it has 2 doors, and we thought we had firmly secured the door that we weren't using, but apparently we didn't, and one of the ducks managed to slip in between the crate and the cardboard overnight, and we lost her. Or at least we're fairly certain it was overnight, because I usually can hear the ducks from where I sit all day, and we didn't hear anything. So lesson learned, learn from our mistake. If you use a dog kennel, be prepared to make sure that everything is super duper secure, because if one of your chicks slips between the wiring of the crate and lands in between it and the cardboard and it can't access water all night and it's super young, well, yeah. So learn from our mistake. They're getting so large they barely all fit under the little mothership, as we call it, the heat plate anymore. Hi. So big. I was hoping they were going to do the dance like, yay, it's new bedding, but nah, they're just going to hover. Yeah, we definitely need another bowl. Alright, that's it, you guys. I will update you in a couple weeks when they'll be probably way bigger than they are now. And I'll see you then.